Welcome to the Comics Cube, everyone. Today we are talking about a great man, George Perez. All right, let's start with this question. When was the first time you remember being exposed to George Perez artwork? Lamar, let's start with you.
First time I was exposed to his artwork, it would have had to have been like the back issues I had that, because I started collecting comics by way of, and I've mentioned it on the show before, by way of, just like picking up comics at secondhand thrift stores and flea markets and yard sales and stuff. So there was some stuff I had of his from like the late 70s. And, I just thought it was of the time, but then it was pointing towards something else. And then by the time, like Crisis, the first Crisis came out and the house ads for that, and then that first cover, I was like, whoa, and yeah, I've been following, like him ever since. But at first I didn't put two and two together that, hey, this was the same guy that was drawing these Justice League comics. Like I just didn't put it together in my head, until a little later. And but yeah, that was the first time I remembered uh that I can remember being exposed to his work. And he never stopped blowing my mind from that point on, you know.
Paul?
I think the first time I kind of noticed him was on a Batman story, Lonely Place of Dying. It's a sequel to Death
Yeah.
in the Family, and it was a crossover between Batman and Teen Titans, or New Titans as it was at the time. So Perez was drawing the Titans chapters, but just the layouts, and I think Tom Grummett was finishing them off.
Yeah.
But of course, Perez did those gorgeous covers, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
For that whole story. But do you know, at the time, it's funny because I noticed recently on Facebook, I think it was Brian Cronin was asking, "Oh, who is the first artist you follow?" Do you know? And everyone I noticed in the comments was saying John Byrne, John Byrne, John Byrne. And so around that time, I was still a kid, and the artist I particularly noticed were Byrne and Jim Aparo. So to me,
Mhm.
it was just like, who's drawing these chapters that aren't Jim Aparo? You know, it's like, why isn't this Jim Aparo? You know, because that is the one I'd fixated on as a kid. You know, and that was one of the first ones I'd noticed. And so it was only like a few years later then when I come to appreciate, oh, actually, this is really good, and these covers are absolutely amazing. You know,
Mhm.
and then you start to notice him in other things then, and you realize just how everywhere his work is, like in DC and in Marvel. And I think it's very easy to sort of take it for granted, his work, because it is so everywhere. And it's so much of a fixture in DC, and it's so much of a fixture in Marvel, that it kind of like just blends. Like you notice it's amazing, but you take it for granted. That's what I found anyway. You
Yeah.
know, because it's always there, you know, and it's always good, and it's always and it doesn't leap out at you in the way something like Burn or Aparo does. But then, as you get older, then you just start to realize just how amazing his work is. So, yeah. So as a kid, I didn't fully appreciate him, but it was Lonely Place of Dying was my first exposure.
I figured the name John Byrne would come up. I was actually trying to see how long it would take.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Uh, how much did your appreciation of George grow the more you tried to draw? Because with me, it was like George. I was exposed to George pretty early. I have an older brother, and I was always aware that people were drawing things because he would always tell me because he drew and he was like, "All right, this guy's a good artist. This guy's a good artist." Blah blah blah. The two names he always brought up were George Perez and John Byrne. Um, I realize now the only reason they ever looked alike is because they had the same inkers.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
then because left to their own devices, they don't look alike at all.
Right.
Um, yeah, but then so I tried my very best to draw like George Perez, and I think that's a reason I don't draw because it's impossible, guys. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Like, what do you feel about that? Like whenever you like, because I know you both draw, and I know
Hmm.
Paul, you don't particularly enjoy drawing, but you are pretty good at it. So Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, you are, man. I really like the way you draw. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think that sometimes when you talk about influence, right? People always talk about, oh, this is the person who made me want to do it, right? But sometimes though, it's even louder when somebody's so good that you're just like, man, I'll never be that good, man. So let me focus my energy on something else that I could actually excel at, right? Sometimes influence comes that way. So like for example, uh I think is it is it who was it that looked at the Garcia Lopez art on the wall when they walked into the office and they were like, hey, is that Garcia Lopez? And they're like, yeah. And he was like, God dang it, and walked out, right? Like, who was that? Y'all know who I'm talking about?
I
I
think I
know
know what
that
you're.
story.
I think I know what you're talking about. I have another story that is very similar, and I know who that person was.
Okay.
Mobius looked at Garcia Lopez's work and said, "This Garcia Lopez, he uses models, right?" And then somebody said no, and then Mobius goes, "That son of a bitch."
That's the one I was thinking about. That's the one I was thinking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he was like, he used models, right? He said no. So he's like, oh man, let me tell. But when you think about like Lopez's work and his work, and you compare them, there's nothing similar about it, right? And if you were to ask just your casual fan of Moebius, and they probably would balk at Garcia Lopez's work, right? Just because he's always on the the Underoos campaign and all of that kind of stuff. And no, it's just superheroes. There's nothing
Different
about that.
schools, different
Yeah,
schools.
yeah, it's different, and then you have a lot of these edge lords that gravitate to like that stuff and like the Sandman stuff and all of that. So, so when you make that kind of comparison, so obviously, he looked at his work and was like, man, this guy's nuts, man. Like yeah, I can't, you know what I mean? Like, obviously, right? So sometimes it happens that way. Like it'll make the influence will make you go in another direction totally because you're just like, I'll never be this good with this. So let me go do something else. So sometimes, the influence is louder that way,
Man, I'll tell you a story that I heard during one of the interviews I was doing for George. There was one point in time when Bill Sienkiewicz was staying at George's house, and they were working together in the same studio. Can you imagine Bill Sienkiewicz and George Perez in the same studio? And then one time, George went to the bathroom with a drawing, with a pencil and a drawing pad. Came back out with a fully formed page.
That's crazy.
That's insane. What about you, Paul?
Wow.
Like, you ever try to emulate or anything?
Yeah, well, I think I was saying I came to appreciate him more and more as I grew older. And part of that was drawing more and more. And one thing I've come to realize is George's faces, just how amazing they are, especially when you compare them to someone like those two artists I mentioned earlier, Byrne and Aparo. And this is no slight against Byrne and Aparo because they're absolutely amazing too.
Yeah, but they
they're
draw the
very
same
similar.
faces. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at here. It's like Byrne and Aparo, especially with Byrne's women, for example, or if you've got Superman and Batman standing
Yeah.
next to each other with Aparo, they look the same, And I don't want to seem like I'm knocking Aparo and Byrne to build up George because they are brilliant, but you realize the more and more you look at George's work that everyone has got a different face. And when you think about, he's often drawing the Justice League or the Avengers or the Teen Titans. So he's drawing a lot, or the Legion, and he's drawing a lot of people on the same page, and they have all got different faces. And you can see it right from like New Teen Titans, like Raven looks completely different to Starfire. Not just because, Starfire's orange, and got green eyes. But like Raven, she's got these cheekbones and she's got like this long jaw, and Starfire's got this sort of cherubic kind of face, I guess. And then, but at the same time, you compare very similar people like Scarlet Witch drawn by George has also got those cheekbones and a pointy jaw, but not in the same way as Raven does.
You
In
know
a
who
Yeah.
does? You know who does
completely-
have a similar face to the Scarlet Witch, the way George draws her, is
Who's that?
George's Quicksilver.
Oh yes,
Yeah, that's
yes,
true. That's very true. Yeah.
and they're
Right?
brother and
Yeah.
sister. Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely.
Mhm.
And so this attention to detail, you know, and I'm not just talking about the way he draws all the backgrounds and he draws all the details in the costume. I'm just talking about something as simple as the faces. You start to appreciate that more and more as you get older. Well, I certainly did anyway, and to the point where it's just always blows me away now. And that came, I think, through doing some drawing myself, you know, and seeing how hard that is to make people different.
Yeah, for me it was well, I could never draw anatomy or, you know, the basics the way he did. But there was a point in time in high school when I tried drawing those big group shots.
Mhm.
And you know, there was a thing in Wizard that where he said how he did it. You know, he made a list and then he did a construction and he knew where everyone was going to go and et cetera, et cetera. And I tried it 3 times and I found it very difficult to make it so that everyone looked like they were interacting or they were organically there. But he just did that all the time. Like, you remember the cover to JLA Avengers #3?
Mhm.
And then I realized, like, even the people who came closest to imitating him, like Phil Jimenez, there'd always be like a couple of people out of place in a big group shot like that. Like, even Phil Jimenez, who came I think he got like maybe 95% of the way there. But there would always be like 1 or 2 people who would still kind of look a little bit out of place. But yeah, it's just, I don't know how he did it. And it's insane. And I think it really hurts me because I can't, anytime I look at a big event that Marvel or DC do, I still hold the artistic standards to that bar that he set. And it's unfair for me to do that because no one can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when Final Crisis came out and I was so annoyed that it wasn't George drawing it. And it's unfair to anyone for me to even say that.
But then Legion of Three Worlds, then he drew, wasn't it, as part of Final Crisis, and
Yeah.
that was astounding. Like, you know. But
Yeah.
the thing about him is that you look at like his very early Avengers work, and then his Legion work, and then Teen Titans, and okay, he's grown as an artist since then, and I think he's gotten better since then, even though that was still pretty great. But that style is so timeless. And I think that's another reason that I kind of took him for granted for a couple of years, because like it's just it fits. It just fits whatever era it is, you know, from like Infinite Crisis all the way back to, you know, those really early Avengers stories, you know, it just fits, and so you just take it for granted, like, oh yeah, that's supposed to be there, you know, it's
Yeah.
supposed to be like that, you know. But
Yeah,
and then you realize,
absolutely.
no, actually, it's astounding that it is like that, you know.
Yeah. It's like, you know, a long way to, it goes a long way when you're able to take characters and you're creating, like what you're talking about Legion of Three Worlds. He was able to take all of those, like, just think about that for a moment. The Legion of Three Worlds, like the Legion of One World isn't difficult enough to try to land and have everybody on the page doing something at the same time, right? So, so, you know, he created you know, when you're able to create worlds where everything fits, then you got something. And that's not something everybody can do. And there's lots of people who have tried to come in and do the highly detailed stuff, and it doesn't always work. Like Jim Lee is a person who will tell you, hey man, I'm just trying to be like George Perez and I'm failing at it, right? Like he'll tell you that, like it's no big deal. But that kind of stuff, like, you know, what Paulie was saying, like whenever his books come out, it could be a new artist or it could be like a guy who's been in the business for 40 years, right? So because he always got better as an artist, but at the same time, like the roots were there, you know? and he never lose the roots. If you can do that, and it's a hard thing to pull off. Like if you can do that, you'll have something. It's kind of like an example of the inverse is I don't know if you guys remember this, but there was an era in the 90s where Herb Trimp was trying to draw in the 90s style.
Yeah, that
You
didn't
know,
really
Yeah,
work.
yeah.
it didn't work out, right? And that's no knock to Herb Trimp, peace be upon him, you know. But I'm just saying it's just
It's
an
commendable
example.
that he even tried, actually.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because you know, he was known for drawing the Hulk 20 years prior and stuff like that. And then he was like, okay, well, let me just try it. You know, so I don't knock him for it, but it's just at the same time, you know, his style was kind of that era, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that, nothing at all. I'm just saying that, you know, it's rare when you have somebody who can get better as an artist in their evolution. You could drop them anywhere and it would fit, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have a favorite George Perez work?
It's difficult because there's so much amazing stuff.
We can name
I'm gonna-
multiple things.
Okay, I'm gonna go for two really obvious ones. Yeah,
Okay,
JLA Avengers,
of course.
just because the thing I was talking about with the faces is really evident in that they all have their own personality and their own faces, and it's absolutely fantastic. And the other one, really obvious one, but it's amazing, is Crisis. It's just amazing. I remember, like, they didn't reprint Crisis for years.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd read about it in letter columns, like all while I was growing up, and like in little introductions. Oh, Crisis did this and Crisis did that, and I was like, "This story sounds amazing," you know? And then it finally came out in a trade when I was in university, and I saw on the internet. I was in the library doing work, and I just looked at like Newsarama or something, and it said it'd come out. So I literally just left what I was doing and ran to the comic shop, got a bus straight there, and bought it. And I think, you know, just by the nature of what it is and when it came out, the story's a bit all over the place, and that's not a dig at Marv Wolfman, but the art just made it worth the wait. You know, it was just made it everything I wanted it to be. It's just absolutely fantastic.
You know,
I love it.
Yeah.
I've got something for that because, like, yes, my first ever George comic was Who's Who, like the covers to Who's Who.
Oh,
And
yeah.
of course, in Who's Who, they reference the Crisis all the time because it's literally something that came out of the wake of Crisis. So I had no idea what the hell Crisis was. Like, you know, in the Flash section, it flat out said Barry Allen died in the Crisis. I'm like, what is this Crisis? That's it for years. And then one day a new comic shop opens up, and I'm walking in the mall with my mom, and I see it. I see the complete set of Crisis on Infinite Earths, the original issues, like in the counter, going for a very affordable price. And then Christmas hits, and the next thing I know, I'm opening that up, and that's what it was. My brother takes the first issue, reads it, hands it over to me. He takes the second issue, and we basically spend the day reading Crisis. It is all over the place, but I kind of really like that because it like functions as a real introduction to everyone.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like modern events could be a little bit more all over the place rather than
Yeah.
characters.
Yeah, I get that because there's a right way and a wrong way to do it, you know. So yeah, I get that.
Yeah. Well, you
Yeah,
know, what's
'cause,
your
like-
favorite? Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Paul.
Go ahead,
Oh,
Paulie. You got it.
sorry to interrupt.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was just saying, like, with regards to all over the place, you're absolutely right, because, like, you know, it starts with the Monitor saying, like, I need all of you heroes and villains together, and then like, after a couple of issues, he's like, I don't need you anymore.
And it's so random.
Yeah.
Like, what an incredibly
doesn't
random
matter.
group. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter because you've got to see like Blue Beetle and Firestorm and Killer Frost and, you know, and all these other, and Solivar. Yeah.
Let's take the weaker Superman, you know, bargain bin Magneto. And then much later on, like my favorite random moment is I think it's the start of issue 7, when Harbinger, Pariah, and Lady Quark are all talking to a representative of the 6 Earths, and it's
Mhm.
Superman of Earth 1, Superman of Earth 2, um, Captain Marvel from Earth S, Uncle Sam, Lady Quark, and the Blue Beetle. Lamar. There's a certain double page spread I've heard you talk about multiple
Oh
times over
man,
the
don't
years.
don't get me started on that, man. I could do a whole show just on that. Yeah, I'm gonna just say JLA Avengers just to bring attention to it because they just reissued it. I probably will never own a copy of it, but I have the originals anyway, so it's
Yeah.
it's not a big deal. But yeah, yeah, that book is I don't think people respect it the way they should. You know,
Oh, again,
uh,
they take it for
yeah,
granted.
yeah, they take it for granted. I think because every time I read that thing, and I read it a few times a year, I still am catching new things. And that book came out, what was it like in 2000 and like 2005,
Yeah, around
2004,
then,
something
yeah.
like that. Yeah. So you talking about that book came out 18 years ago. It doesn't seem like it, but it did, and I'm still catching new stuff, you know. Um, and so yeah, I love that story. Let's see, what's another one? Of course, Paulie said the crisis. I love that. I really loved his Justice League work.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I love that stuff.
With Jerry Conway.
Yeah, they were an awesome team. I think that's also an underrated part of his legacy. Just as a series, I think it's kind of underrated now.
Well, I think
Um,
the interesting thing about his Justice League stuff is like, and I don't think I'm insulting Jerry Conway by saying this. The plots are pretty conventional.
yeah,
They're fairly conventional stories, but because of George, like there's this one thing where Aquaman is is like jumping in on the red tornado in Tio Moro,
hmm
and it's just this like stop motion sequence where he's diving into the room, and
yeah.
I'm like, well, he didn't need to draw it that way,
Mm.
but it looks really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of that in that series, like in just with like the covers and stuff. Because and I tend to not like stories that revolve around like superhero teams fighting one another, like fighting amongst themselves physically. I tend to kind of shy away from that. But they did a lot of that in the Justice League series, and it was great. Uh, and even like with the covers and stuff, there's a cover that's like front and back, and it's just the Justice League like fighting one another, right? And just that kind of stuff did it for me because then it was kind of novel. It was like, wow, I have to read this. Like, why is Justice League fighting one another? And then not only is it just the cover, it's the back cover too. So like what's going on? So if this is going on the cover, I gotta read the book,
Yeah.
so but that's what a cover is supposed to do. But yeah, I mean, like we could be here all day, man. um Another one I think is underrated because that's just kind of what I'm going to relegate it to because I can never pick a favorite. The run in his Avengers
Which Avengers?
with Kurt Busiek,
Yeah.
the part where he did everybody, they went back in time to like the medieval days and everybody
Oh
had
my goodness.
like in period armor, and he literally designed armor for each and every character, and it was different. Like all the sets of armor were different, but it was still but it was based around the aesthetic of the character. That was just insane. you know
Mm.
um
You know, my
just see
favorite
yeah.
one is my favorite one there is Hercules, because he just didn't redesign that. He just reverted him into his original design,
Right. Yeah,
which is
yeah.
brilliant.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. That was crazy. It's like, yeah, because because Hercules is older than that period. So it's like, what do? Right? You just have to push him back further. So we're just gonna give him back his original joint, And so yeah, just stuff like that. And it's hard for me really to pick though, because you can tell he loves the characters that he's doing, right? And the love just comes out in his work. And I think that that's probably the thing that like I gravitate towards even more so than the detail. You know,
Yeah.
like when you look at like Alex Ross, for example, and you know, he draws Superman and Batman and those paintings and stuff like that. And he'll tell you, like, I never get tired of doing it. And you're like, man, how many times are you going to draw a Superman or you're going to paint a picture of Batman? He's like, I love these characters, man. It comes out in the work, you know? So that I'll always be gravitated to. Because you could tell with him, it's not just a paycheck, you know?
Alex very clearly is influenced by George.
Yeah, yeah, there's no question about it. There's no question, you know?
Yeah, there are sketches floating around on the internet
Mhm.
of work that a teenage Alex Ross did, which is
Mhm.
just another DC parallel universe. And
Mhm.
I swear, teenage Alex Ross draws exactly like early 80s George Perez.
Yeah, I believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that. Matter of fact, I'm throwing his that Crisis cover that they worked on together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm throwing that in the mix too. When you talk about like the greatest works, because that was insane. Like, yeah, with just you talking about hundreds of characters on this cover.
Over 500.
And yeah, it was over 500. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
You know, and you can identify everybody. So we're not talking like crowd scenes or anything where it's just the little blorps. You know, these are like these individual characters. You know, like that's crazy. In fact, Alex Ross said that he was scared to even paint over it because he didn't want to mess up the pencils.
My favorite George Perez works, I feel. So there's Crisis. I love Crisis. Number 7, especially the death of Supergirl.
Yeah,
was really powerful. I loved his Wonder Woman because I felt like there was something about that kind of, that kind of fantastical, mythological thing that was perfect for George in a way that buildings like Metropolis wasn't really, you know what I mean? What I always wished he had a run that one.
Yeah.
I always wished he had a run on that is huge.
Yeah, I didn't realize that box set was that big. Jeez.
I always wished he had a run on Thor because
him on Thor would be nuts.
It would have been amazing. And I love his work on CrossGen, but specifically the 3rd issue of CrossGen Chronicles, which is just so good.
Oh man.
I always say he introduced me because my first DC comic was Who's Who with his covers. My first Marvel comic that I actually bought with my own money was Infinity Gauntlet, which like artistically is also amazing. Like if you remember, like just the cover to issue number 1 is one of the best covers Marvel has ever produced. And then he introduced me to the CrossGen universe, which is like, what? What's the CrossGen universe? And so on and so forth. But the thing that I do find a little underrated is you mentioned the medieval times Avengers. The issue before that, the first issue, you know that sequence where the original Avengers are all having coffee or tea in the beginning, and then Thor comes barging in? That sequence is so good. It makes me rip my hair out as to how good it is. Like just the quietness of the whole scene, and they're all talking and they're all drinking tea, and Jarvis is there. And then all of a sudden, like, yeah, where's Thor? We don't even know where Thor is. And then all of a sudden, Thor barges in through the window. Like that sequence is so good. He takes it from like 0 to 11 in like 2 pages. It's amazing. I love him. Okay. What do you think George Perez's legacy is when it comes to comics? In fact, let me kick that off with a more specific question. If George Perez had not drawn Crisis on Infinite Earths, would we have gotten to the point in the industry where it's a big event every couple of years?
Do you know what? I don't think we would have.
Really?
Because it would have been a completely different series, Crisis would have.
Keep in mind, Secret Wars is already out. So this
Yeah.
is me throwing a monkey wrench into that whole thing.
But also, to answer the larger question as well, you had that period with the image artists where you went away from that sort of big scope kind of drawing, and you had more like focus on muscled individuals and that kind of thing, just sort of close up on the people rather than the environment that the people were in, so the image artists focused on how big the people were, whereas artists like Perez focused on how big the situation they were in is, perhaps. And so you kind of went away from like Perez's kind of thing with the image artists, but then pretty soon after, like, you had artists like Brian Hitch going back to that kind of thing, the authority and things like that. And I wonder if we would have had that going back to it, or if it would have continued going down that image route without artists like Perez just showing how amazing it could be and influencing people like Brian Hitch. Like,
Yeah.
Brian Hitch took. It's insane that George used to be considered realistic as an artist, right? Because the moment Brian Hitch showed up and started drawing like every seam on every costume, I'm like, holy crap. All of a sudden George now looks cartoony, which is not a knock. It's just like the way comic book art has evolved.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, Lamar.
I'm going to tell you emphatically 100%, absolutely not. If crisis doesn't happen, the stuff that we're seeing, we're like, because events are now just like a part of the industry, right? So, so much so that, they just manufacture events now to say, okay, we got one in the summer and we're going to run that 5-6 issues. And then we're going to do another one during Christmas, and we're going to run that, so it's seasonal now, right? For lack of a better term. So that wasn't the case certainly before that. And I'm saying that as like, I'm a single issue guy. Like I love, just stories that are told in a single issue, right? I mean, because I think there's an art to that people kind of don't appreciate anymore. But, if you're going to do an event, it has to like count, right? And, and like you said, you're talking about Secret Wars. Secret Wars was really fulfilling as an event because it was basically like the comic book version of you playing with your action figures with your friends, and you're kind of inventing new powers for the characters that they don't have so that you don't have to lose. That's basically what Secret Wars is, right? So I read that now and I love it. Like I haven't lost love for that, so it serves a purpose, even though, the story is kind of out there. It's crazy in a different way. But with Crisis, they kind of establish like really, really early that this is not like your typical like comic book story, because there's going to be characters that don't make it out of this, and it's going to be major characters, right? So like I can still think about now the way that the Flash kept popping up, the way Barry kept popping up, and he started to look more like a skeleton, and he kind of like was there, but he wasn't. And so I was just like, whoa, what is this? Right? Like, what's happening here? So that real sense of like there are about to be changes made and that this really has consequences. I think that was really the first story where that was the case over an entire like universe, right? And so people in their own way, like other stories have been chasing it, but none of them have really like captured it, and a lot of it has to do with the way that George Perez drew that book, and like it's hard. It's like a tightrope walk because you have a lot of stuff going on with a lot of different characters, but the way that he draws the characters almost seem insignificant when you're looking at them compared to the event itself. That's a really, really hard thing to do and center characters in the story, right?
Because he'll actually draw the backgrounds.
Yes, like the backgrounds are huge, and then you're looking at a page of Superman and he's really, really small, right? So it's like, okay, this is not the kind of thing where he's just going to swoop in and punch everybody and then it's going to be over, right? That ain't happening this time, right? So to be able to do that and to have that story go the way it did, and with everything that came out of it, after the fact, bad and good, like you can't just get the hot guy on the street to do that. It's not going to work, and I'm going to tell you that if it wasn't for him doing that book the way he did it and pouring what he poured into it, the event thing that we see today as a phenomenon probably wouldn't exist, and also for good and for bad, it probably wouldn't exist. You definitely wouldn't have the type of storytelling we have now where you have everything is like a camera shot, right? You definitely wouldn't have that, because he did a lot of that. And sometimes the camera would be right on your face and then sometimes it'd be pulled back like this, so like he changed the game in a lot of ways with that book, Yeah. So as far as like events go, as far as like a performance from an artist over an event, that's number one for me. And I don't think it's going anywhere. And we've seen a lot of good work come out of these events, but nothing like that though.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference between that and Secret Wars, aside from the story, is the fact that, Secret Wars is exactly what it was. It was a self-contained story. Crisis was all about worlds will live, worlds will die, and nothing will ever be the same.
Yeah.
And that's what all of these events are about now, right? It's all about like, oh yeah, everything's gonna change after this event. So that's the main thing. But as weird as that is, and we haven't even brought up New Teen Titans, which is of course a huge thing for everyone. It is by far, like, of all the interviews I did about George, it is by far the most mentioned title among those creators, and that's probably because that's what put him on the map. But quite frankly, George's legacy to the world at large is the snap.
Yeah.
Like, everybody, literally everybody in the world knows something he did, whether or not they know that he did it. That is insane, guys. That is crazy. And also, like, that is just like, that's another thing, because we're talking about Crisis and events. He did Infinity Gauntlet too. So he also kind of kickstarted that whole thing for Marvel and for DC.
That's true.
There's so many people who are clearly very influenced by him. And the other thing that I would say about his legacy, I mean, going back to New Teen Titans, is I think he was a very powerful force for the portrayal of women. Because especially if you look at New Teen Titans, the 4 most powerful people on that team are women and Kid Flash.
Right.
And they're all different.
Yeah.
And they're all different.
All of those women are they're not like interchangeable women,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you won't even know. Like, if I asked you who the most powerful was, you won't even be able to tell, because they're all different.
Yeah.
And then Kid Flash, who was the most insufferable member of that team. Why are you attacking me for being a conservative? Okay.
Which is funny because you love Wally, so
It's crazy, Lamar. I think, like, now we're just gonna go off topic, but it's crazy because I think the more I read Wally, the more I'm convinced I really just like Wade's Wally.
It's all a consistent character with Wally. Okay, to go off really off topic, because everyone was a bit of a jerk when they were a teenager, right? When they were 19 and they thought they had all the answers and they were searching for an identity. That's very believable that someone would be like, I'm a conservative now. And I'm going to mention it at every opportunity.
And, by the time Wade got on him, he did learn. See,
he'd grown out of it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
He'd grown up. So that's one of those things. Can you guys name artists that you absolutely feel, whether or not you ever heard it confirmed, you absolutely feel must have been influenced by George? Because obviously there's Phil Jimenez and Alex Ross. Who else do you think like
Was
carries
Brian
the George
Hitch.
Perez DNA for you? Brian Hitch, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Brian Hitch, that's a good one. Let's see.
Ivan Reese.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just about to say
Definitely,
him, yeah.
definitely Ivan Reese. And let's see somebody else. Like I said, Jim Lee. I think
All
that's
the
pretty.
image guys.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, every last one of them.
Gary Frank.
Gary Frank. Yeah.
Yeah, Gary Frank, definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Gene Ha.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Guy likes drawing backgrounds too much to crisscross. Crisscross that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
100%. Jamal Igle, who
Mm-hmm.
yeah, when I was talking to him, I was like, you co-created a multiverse comic for Ahoy where two doppelgangers don't look exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Shoot. Yeah, that list is probably who's who of everybody in the past 35 years.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's another thing. Richard Pace was like that. He's the reason I'm so sketchy. Like him and Bernie Wrightson. Okay. Very cool. And then you get people like Xander Cannon who told me like, yeah, that's the reason my work is so cartoony because I didn't even try.
Yeah.
But
See,
the thing is,
that's what I'm
avoiding
talking about.
somebody's influence is still being influenced by that person.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, let's do this. Who do you think was George's best inker?
Oh man.
Because I'm gonna go with Dick Giordano.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, shoot.
Yeah.
You talking about it when you say his name, you talking about a guy. You could probably say that for just about everybody that he worked with, just about. Because and that's my pick. Especially like earlier in his career. Yeah, definitely Dick Giordano. But like later in his career, I liked it when he was inking his own stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, because I think he had just gotten to a point with both of those crafts where he could do it and nothing was lost. So yeah, definitely. I think definitely Dick Giordano. I think definitely.
I think my funniest story regarding one of his artists is Al Vey, who his inker on Avengers, on his second Avengers run, and then after the first 3 issues of the Morgan Conquest, George was like, "Yeah, this is taking me too much time, and I want to deliver it on a monthly schedule, so I'm just gonna do layouts and breakdowns." And then Al Vey went, yeah, but George's breakdowns are like everyone else's full pencils."
Yeah.
Well, this is it, isn't it? I mentioned like earlier on that he does breakdowns and layouts on that Lonely Place of Dying, and Tom Grummett does the full art. But you can tell it's George Perez. You can see George Perez in there, it's Dick Giordano though. His style really complements George, I think.
I think so.
Because I've seen Dick Giordano, and obviously he's fantastic, but I've seen him like later on in his career when he inked sort of modern kind of 90s artists, and there's like he overpowers that artist a bit with his style, but there was none of that with George Perez because their styles complemented each other so well that one wasn't overpowering the other.
Yeah, because Dick Giordano's actual drawing style is close enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's get heavy here. What did you think when you heard the news about his health? Because I remember my reaction was I woke up, I checked my phone, I was really sleepy, I saw it, and I went, "Fuck, that sucks." And then I went back to sleep. And then I woke up and I completely forgot about it, and I saw it again. I was like, "Oh fuck, that sucks."
Yeah. I when I first heard about it, because I had some people send me some texts or whatever and some messages and stuff, and they were like, "Hey, have you heard about this?" And because you know how like you get messages in like from different sources, like from different social media apps and stuff, and then you're just kind of checking them, and they're all, and when you pull down the list, they're all kind of saying the same thing. So I just clicked on the first one, and honestly, when I clicked on it, like it was an article. I can't remember where, what the source of the article was, but I was when I got it, I just was like, I'm not even reading the story. Like I didn't even read it, because I was like, man, shoot. And this was early in the morning, man. So, I stood up and I was kicking the air and everything else. I was like, man, look, this is crazy, and it's not even a thing for me, where, because I'm not into like famous people and celebrities and stuff where I elevate them. You know what I mean? I'm not into that. So it wasn't that. It was just that, man, out of, when you start thinking about news like this, and I'm like, George Perez, though, you know what I mean? Like, like, yeah, just trying to make sense of it. Cause that's what happens when you hear stuff like this. You try to make sense of it. And I was just like, man, this is, you know, like I don't even believe I'm hearing this right now, you know. Um, and then it just kept coming, and then people like his representatives started speaking out on it. And they were like, yeah, it's true, and this is what we're gonna do. And I'm gonna tell you something. I respect it. I don't know if he'll ever see this, but I'm just saying, yo, the fact that he just was like, I'm rejecting treatment and I'm gonna live life on my terms for however much I got left. I respect that so much. I respect it. And it's not something where I'm like, well, uh, that's the decision everybody should make or anything like that. But I'm just saying that I respect it. And, my hat's off to you for making that decision, because, it's your life and you have a right to live it the way you want to, no matter how much longer you have. So, um, I respect it. Like, just on some man type stuff, like human being type stuff, I respect it. Outside of everything else, the art and how much he effect he had on my life with his work, all of that. I just respect that just as a human being. You know.
Paul?
Well, I think it's kind of like I kind of felt the same way I do when I think it was as big as when like someone like David Bowie died or something. Not that George thankfully is still with us. But it just made me realize that these figures that I again took for granted and just felt like they're always going to be there. Because they always had been there throughout my life. It just made me realize, yeah, I've kind of taken this guy's presence for granted, even though he's retired. He'd been retired for a few years now. I just thought, yeah, he's always going to be in comics because he always has been, and he's always going to be a presence, And it's the same with these big pop culture figures, like David Bowie. They're just part of the scenery of your life in a way. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, like describing someone like George Perez's scenery, but I don't mean it in a disrespectful way. I just mean like it's a constant presence, just sort of illustrating your life, and in the case of Bowie, making the soundtrack for your life, and then you realize, oh wow, yeah, actually, these people are mortal, and they're not going to be around forever, and yeah, and you just get this, and maybe it's quite a selfish way of looking at it, I suppose, but it just makes you focus on your own mortality a bit, as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was very affecting when I found out. I was very sad.
Yeah, I felt really sad about it. And then I just, I don't know. I had a really hard time, like, trying to figure out how I felt about it, because I'm like, of course I was very sad, but I think I was more angry because I'm like, he retired on his own terms, right? And how many people in comics get to do that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if somebody gets to do that, you want them to be able to just enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there it was. Like, he had 3 years of retirement, and that was it. That sucks.
Yeah.
It really sucks. And then you think about all of the people who, quite frankly, the world would be better off without. Putin. Okay.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and it's just it's terrible. Like I hate it. I hate that that it happens. Um yeah. So if you could say any one thing to George, what would it be? Because I would just say thank you, George. That drawing over there is by George, and uh, it was acquired for me by our old friend Deborah Jane Shelley. So
Wow, that's crazy.
that's gonna be a special thing that I'm going to hold on to for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Paul, what would you say?
Well, again, just thank you. Just his work has meant so much to me throughout my life, and like every comic I've ever loved has been touched by his influence or directly drawn by him. So just everything the thing I love most about pop culture, superheroes, superhero comics. I that's my absolute favorite thing in regards to pop culture and literature and art. And it wouldn't be the same without George Perez. It wouldn't be as good without George Perez. So just immense gratitude, definitely.
Lamar?
Yeah. I mean, like, what do you say, right? Because everything that, we try to say is gonna fall short, you know. So, I would just say, duau, thank you, gratitude, veneration, and just for outside of just the art, just for being the kind of human being that you are. Because the industry needs more people like George Perez. The world needs more people like George Perez, and the fact that we had him for this long, you know, uh, is a testament to the way the world actually works. Because, a lot of times we get bogged down in all of the craziness and the things that are happening and the tumultuous things that we have now. But, when those bad times happen, you can always pull JLA Avengers off the shelf, you know, and we got almost half a century of that from George Perez. So no matter what, that's not going anywhere, you know. So it's funny because when you leave a legacy like that, you're still alive from an African perspective because you know your life is attached to your name. So as long as people remember your name, when people say your name, you continue to live. You know, so
Yeah.
you will live forever. That's guaranteed.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that was one of the things when I saw that he was refusing treatment. I'm like, that is a really cool thing because I feel like our society, you know, when you hear that death is coming, it's all about staving it off as much as you can. So to
Yeah.
be able to say like, "Oh, I'm at peace with this," is a huge thing. Let's close this off with one fun question. If George could have drawn a run on any one character or team or book that he didn't, so you can't name anyone where he did. So you can't name Superman because he did. Who would you have picked? And bonus points if you can attach a writer to that book. Because I'm going with Thor. He would have done a great Thor. He would have done a great Asgard. Everyone on Asgard. And you know what? Just for the fun of it, Walt Simonson can write it.
Oh wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna say the Flash. I don't believe he's ever been on the Flash, and I would get like someone like Mark Waid or Kurt Busiek, um, who would want to make the most of the abilities of the Flash to write it, in the sense that like you would get the Flash going into the future, and you would get the Flash going into the past and going into other dimensions and other worlds, using that aspect of his powers rather than just in Keystone and Central City, like someone like, say, Jeff Johns would write. And that's not a dig at Jeff Johns, but different types of story, because I just think like the detail that George would put into those kind of stories, like he would design an amazing looking future when the Flash, even if Flash was going to the future for one issue, it would look like amazing. And if the Flash was going to like cowboy times, he'd draw the hell out of Cowboy Flash. It would just.
And he would insist that like Jonah Hex showed up, El Diablo showed up, Cinnamon showed up.
Absolutely, because again, with a character like the Flash as well, you've got the Flash family then, and you've got these amazing group shots of like Barry, Wally, Jay, Jesse Quick, Impulse, all the rest, and then like George would draw the hell out of that as well. So the Flash.
Kumar?
Man, I'm gonna cheat a little bit.
You can name a team, it's fine.
And I'm gonna just name a book because I love like anthology books, right?
You are cheating.
Yeah, so I'm gonna cheat just a tad bit, but this is for my man, so I got to do it. I would like for him to draw Mystery in Space because number one, we know that that's Adam Strange's book, so that's why I said I'm cheating slightly. That's it. So basically, he's drawing Adam Strange, right? But out of Mystery in Space, you can get so much. You can get Challengers of the Unknown. If you wanted to stretch it out to like Thanagar and stuff like that, you can get Hawkman. Anytime you get Hawkman, you can get the Atom. So we could just take all of that and blow it out. And when you're talking about somebody see what I'm saying? Space Cabbie. We could keep going, right? There's so much that we could do to expand that. And there's only one person for the job for something like that. Now, like Paulie said, I would love to see Mark Waid write it. That would just be absolutely insane. And every month I'd buy it 3 or 4 times and give the other 3 copies to people. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's what I'm saying. Mystery in Space, no question.
Thank you guys. This was cathartic and good.
Yeah.
There you go.